The force binds all things across the galaxy, connecting every living being in an invisible web of light and shadow. But 400 years in an ocean of stars away, another kind of unity held sway, one built on reason, exploration, and the quiet conviction that no phenomenon, however strange, was beyond understanding. The Starship Enterprise D carried that conviction into the void every day of her 5-year mission. She had never expected the void to answer back. It began as a ripple in subspace, faint enough that the sensors nearly dismissed it as background noise. Lieutenant Commander, Data noticed it first, a fractional variance in the fabric of local space, oscillating at a frequency his positronic processors had never cataloged. Within seconds, the ripple became a fissure, and the fissure became a maw of light that swallowed the Enterprise D whole. Captain Jean-Luc Picard gripped the arms of his command chair as the ship shuddered. Red alert klaxons cutting through the bridge's usual calm. "Report," he said, his voice level despite the chaos playing across the view screen. Streaks of color that belonged to no astronomical phenomenon in the Federation database. Structural integrity holding. "Captain," Commander Riker called from tactical, bracing against the helm rail. "Whatever this is, it's not tearing us apart. It's redirecting us." "Redirecting to where?" Picard asked. Data's fingers moved across his console with inhuman precision, though his golden eyes carried an expression Picard had rarely seen on the android, something close to wonder. "Unknown, Captain. The energy signature does not correspond to any wormhole, subspace tear, or Q-related phenomenon in Starfleet records. It exhibits properties consistent with both quantum entanglement," and he paused, searching for a word that didn't exist in his vocabulary banks yet. Something resembling a sentient field, as though the anomaly itself possesses intent. Before Picard could respond, the light dissolved as suddenly as it had come, and the view screen resolved into something that stopped every officer on the bridge cold. A city planet stretched to every horizon. Not a city built upon a world, but a world that had become a city, spires of duracrete and transparasteel, climbing kilometers into a haze-choked sky, traffic lanes threading between towers like veins of light, an entire planetary surface, paved over an architecture that had no analog in 3 centuries of Federation cartography. Starships of unfamiliar design, sleek cruisers, bearing the sigil of some unknown republic, squat gunships, transports by the thousand, filled the space around them like a hive disturbed. "My God," Riker breathed. "Captain," Data said, already cross-referencing every database at his disposal. "I am detecting no match for this location in Starfleet's stellar cartography, Federation historical records, or any known civilization within explored space." And yet, he tilted his head, an old habit that signaled deep processing. The architecture, the vessel design, and preliminary energy readings suggest a civilization of considerable technological sophistication, possibly comparable to, or exceeding, the Federation's own. "Comparable how?" Picard asked, rising from his chair. "I am detecting an energy field permeating this entire region of space, Captain. It does not register on any subspace or electromagnetic scale I possess. It appears to be," Data's brow creased, a flicker of genuine uncertainty crossing his synthetic features, "alive, or at minimum, generated by living consciousness on a scale I cannot yet quantify." Picard felt the hair rise on his arms, though he could not have said why. In 30 years of Starfleet service, he had encountered godlike beings, temporal paradoxes, and civilizations built on principles utterly alien to humanity. But something about the way Data hesitated, the android who never hesitated, told him this was different. "Hail them," Picard said. "Peaceful intentions, standard first contact protocol." "Captain," Worf rumbled from tactical, "3 vessels are changing course. They are moving to intercept." On the screen, sleek cruisers bearing crimson and gray hull markings peeled away from Coruscant's orbital lanes, weapons ports rotating to bear on the Enterprise DS position. Behind them, smaller starfighters, twin-winged, angular, unmistakably military, scrambled from a hangar bay half a kilometer wide. "They're hailing us in return, Captain," said the communications officer. "Audio only." The frequency doesn't match any translation matrix we have. Then we improvise, Picard said, straightening his uniform. This is Captain Jean-Luc Picard of the United Federation of Planets Starship Enterprise. We arrived here through unknown means and mean no harm to your people. We request peaceful contact. Static answered, then a voice, clipped, formal, carrying the particular strain of someone, speaking to a superior while trying not to sound afraid. Unidentified vessel. You are ordered to power down weapons and prepare to be boarded. Any hostile action will be met with force. Confirm compliance. Picard exchanged a glance with Riker. Lower shields, he said quietly. Weapons to stand by. Let's not begin our acquaintance with this galaxy by giving them a reason to fear us. As the order was carried out, Data remained fixed on his console, still parsing the impossible energy field that saturated the space around them. A field that, unbeknownst to him, connected every living being. In this galaxy, in ways the Federation's finest scientists could never have theorized. He did not yet have a name for it. He would soon learn it was called the Force, and that his arrival here, quiet, curious, and entirely unplanned, had already set something in motion that no Jedi, no Sith, and no Starfleet captain could fully control. Below them, in a chamber high above the Senate district, a man in Chancellor's robes paused mid-sentence, his gaze drifting toward the window as though he had felt something shift in the currents. Of the Force itself, he said nothing. He simply smiled. If you want to see more characters enter the Star Wars galaxy, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character you'd want to see in the comments below. The Republic cruisers held position at a cautious distance, weapons armed but not firing, a standoff that Picard recognized immediately as the same delicate calculus he'd performed 100 times before with the Romulans, the Cardassians, the countless unknown powers the Enterprise had encountered at the edge of Federation space. Someone here was waiting to see what the newcomers would do before deciding whether they were a threat. Captain, Data reported, I have intercepted and begun decoding local communications traffic. This is a war, Captain, a significant one. References to separatists, the Republic, clone divisions, and an entity referred to as the Jedi Order recur with high frequency. I am also detecting political structures, a Senate, a Chancellor, thousands of member worlds. This is not a single nation-state. It is a galactic government. A government at war, Picard said grimly. That explains the welcome. Incoming transmission, Captain, the comm officer said. Visual this time. The view screen resolved into the image of a woman in ornate robes, flanked by two men whose bearing Picard recognized instantly, not soldiers exactly, but something adjacent, carrying themselves with the stillness of people trained to a discipline beyond mere physical combat. One had close-cropped gray hair and calm, assessing eyes. The other, younger, watched the screen with unconcealed intensity. I am Senator Bail Organa of Alderaan. The woman said no. Picard corrected himself. The man with the gray hair had spoken, translated a half-second later by the Universal Translator's rapid analysis of the alien tongue. You've entered Republic space without clearance, without transponder codes, and without any known point of origin. I'd ask you to explain yourselves, but I suspect the explanation will be as strange as your arrival. I am Captain Jean-Luc Picard, he replied. We are explorers from a civilization called the United Federation of Planets. We were pulled through what our science officer describes as a spatial anomaly and have no knowledge of your galaxy, your war, or your customs. We seek only to understand our situation and, if possible, return home. The younger of the two robed men leaned toward the camera, studying Picard's face with an intensity that made the captain distinctly aware of being evaluated by something more than eyes. Master Windu, he said quietly, though the translator caught it. I don't sense deception, but I don't sense anything I recognize, either. It's like he's not fully here. The older man, Windu, evidently, nodded slowly. Captain Picard, I am Master Mace Windu of the Jedi Order. This is Senator Organa. And beside me, Master Obi-Wan Kenobi. Your vessel appeared without warning above the capital of the Galactic Republic during a time of war. I trust you understand our caution. Entirely, Picard said. May I ask, the Jedi Order, what is it you represent? Windu's expression didn't change, but something in the setup. His jaw suggested the question was either refreshingly honest or deeply suspicious. Peacekeepers, guardians of the Republic. We serve the Force, and the Force serves the people of this galaxy. The Force, Picard repeated, glancing at Data, who was already absorbing every syllable with rapt attention. Captain, Data said quietly off-channel. The being referred to as Master Kenobi displayed a physiological response, increased micro-expressions around the eyes, consistent with genuine, perceptual surprise when he looked at you. I believe he may possess some sensory capability beyond conventional human parameters. Understood, Data. File it. Picard returned his attention to the screen. Master Windu, Senator Organa, we have no interest in your war, and no intention of interfering in matters that are not our own. We ask only for safe passage, and perhaps counsel, as we determine how to return to our own space. There was a pause, the kind Picard had learned to read across a dozen species now. The silent negotiation of political minds weighing risk against opportunity. Finally, Organa spoke. The Chancellor will want to meet you personally, Captain. A vessel with your capabilities, arriving from nowhere during wartime. You understand this cannot go unexamined. Of course, Picard said. We would be honored. Then permission is granted for a shuttle, one shuttle, to dock at Coruscant's designated diplomatic platform. Your ship will remain here, escorted, until the Chancellor's office has concluded its assessment. The transmission ended. Picard turned to his senior staff, already assembling the away team in his mind. Number 1, you have the bridge. Data, Counselor Troy, you're with me. If there's any subtext to this Chancellor's intentions, I want both a computational mind and an empathic one in the room. Data rose from his station, but as he did, his gaze lingered a moment longer on the sensor readout. The Force signature blooming across Coruscant like a vast, slow tide, and one particular point within it, deep in the Senate district, that pulsed with a texture unlike any other he had. Cataloged, cold, layered, patient, in a way that reminded him, disquietingly, of predatory behavior patterns he had studied in exobiology archives. He said nothing of it yet. The data was insufficient. But Data had learned, across years of service alongside Picard, that insufficient data was simply an invitation to gather more. Fascinating, he murmured, and followed his captain toward the turbolift, unaware that the very anomaly the Jedi could not name was already watching him back. The shuttle descended through Coruscant's atmosphere in silence, save for the hum of its impulse engines and the soft chime of Data's tricorder analog, cycling through sensor sweeps. Picard watched the city unfold beneath them, an endless cascade of towers, skylanes choked with traffic that moved, with the density of a living circulatory system, advertisements flickering in a dozen, unfamiliar scripts across building faces a kilometer tall. It's a marvel, Troy said softly from her seat. Though her expression carried a tension Picard recognized well. And it's exhausted, Captain. I can feel it even from here. Layers of fear underneath all this grandeur. Fear that's been building for a long time. The war, Picard said. Something more specific than that. I don't have the vocabulary for it yet. Data, meanwhile, had not looked up from his readings since they'd entered the atmosphere. Captain, I have been cataloging what the locals refer to as the Force since our arrival. My preliminary conclusion is that it represents a genuine, measurable energy field, not mysticism, but a phenomenon Federation science has simply never encountered. It appears to interact with living tissue at a level below cellular structure. Master Kenobi's apparent perception of my internal state during our transmission was not intuition. It was sensory data, processed through a biological interface my positronic brain does not possess. You're saying he can sense things about people the way our sensors read a hull? Picard said. A crude analogy, but functionally accurate, sir. The shuttle settled onto the designated platform, and the doors of the Republic's diplomatic reception hissed open to reveal an honor guard of white armored soldiers, clones. Data noted immediately their genetic uniformity, apparent even to a cursory visual scan, flanking a broad avenue that led toward the Senate rotunda. Kenobi and Windu waited at its head, along with a third figure, a green-skinned being barely a meter tall, leaning on a jimmer stick, whose presence in the Force struck Data's growing sensory awareness like a struck bell, resonant and vast in a way utterly disproportionate to his physical size. Master Yoda, Kenobi said, by way of introduction, as Picard and his party approached. Grandmaster of our order. Captain Picard, Yoda said, tilting his head, ancient eyes studying the human with unhurried patience. Far you have traveled, further than distance alone can measure. We're still working out exactly how far, Master Yoda, Picard admitted. And this one? Yoda's gaze shifted to Data, and something in his expression sharpened, not suspicion, precisely, but the alertness of a mind encountering a genuine puzzle. Strange you are. Alive, but not, as others are alive. A different song, your presence sings in the Force. Neither absent, nor quite present. Data inclined his head. You are perceptive, Master Yoda. I am an android, an artificial life form. I possess no biological substrate. I confess I did not expect to register within your sensory framework at all. Everything that thinks, that chooses, that grows, echoes in the Force, Yoda said. Even you, it seems. Curious, this is. Curious indeed. Windu's expression remained guarded as the group proceeded toward the Senate buildings, interior chambers, where Chancellor Palpatine's office awaited. Captain, your officer's nature raises questions we will need to explore. An artificial mind capable of registering. In the Forces, unprecedented in our records. Data has served with distinction for years, Picard said, a note of quiet pride entering his voice. I'd trust his judgment as readily as any officer's, organic or otherwise. They passed through corridors of soaring transparent steel and polished stone. Senators and aides pausing to stare at the newcomers with expressions, ranging from curiosity to open alarm. Data absorbed every detail, political tension etched into body language. The subtle segregation of alien species into factional clusters. The omnipresent hum of a bureaucracy straining under the weight of war. It was as they approached the turbolift to the Chancellor's tower office that Data felt it, not through any conventional sensor, but through the nascent, still forming awareness of the force that is positronic. Architecture had somehow begun to develop, a presence high above them, radiating a stillness so absolute it felt less like calm and more like a held breath. He glanced at Yoda and saw the old master's ears had lowered fractionally, his grip on the jimmer stick, tightening by a fraction no one trained. I would have caught. Master Yoda, Data said quietly, falling into step beside him. Do you sense something unusual as we approach the Chancellor's office? Yoda was silent for a long moment. Sense many things, I do, young one. Not all of them, do I understand. He looked up at Data with an expression that was, for the first time, unmistakably troubled. But you asked the right question. Attention, that deserves. Ahead of them, the turbolift doors opened, revealing a spacious antechamber bathed in the amber light of Coruscant's setting sun. And at its center, a man in dark robes rose from behind an ornate desk, arms spreading in a gesture of practiced, gracious welcome. Captain Picard, said Supreme Chancellor Sheev Palpatine, his smile warm, his eyes calm and unreadable. What an extraordinary pleasure. Please, come in. I have been eager to meet the travelers who fell from the stars. Behind that smile, buried beneath decades of discipline no Jedi censor had ever pierced, something ancient and patient took quiet. Careful note of the golden-eyed machine standing at Picard's side, and understood. In an instant no one else in the room could perceive that it had just met a mind unlike any it had accounted for in all its careful planning. Chancellor Palpatine's office was a study in curated warmth, rich wood paneling, a sweeping view of Coruscant's skyline bathed in the gold of late afternoon, the kind of room designed to put visitors at ease. Picard had spent enough years in rooms exactly like it, on a dozen worlds, to recognize the architecture of persuasion when he stood inside it. Please sit, Palpatine said, gesturing to chairs arranged before his desk with the easy hospitality of a man entirely unthreatened by the extraordinary. I confess, in my years as Chancellor, I have received emissaries from a great many worlds. None arrived quite so dramatically as you, Captain. Circumstances beyond our control, Chancellor, Picard said, taking his seat while Data and Troy remained standing slightly behind him. flanking the meeting in the formal posture of a Starfleet away team. We're grateful for your galaxy's patience while we determine how to return to our own. Of course, Master Windu tells me your vessel demonstrates capabilities that exceed even our most advanced military designs. That is intriguing in a time of war. Palpatine's tone remained light, but Picard caught the calculation beneath it, subtle as a current beneath still water. I hope you'll forgive my directness, Captain, but the Republic finds itself in a difficult position. Any advantage, technological, tactical, becomes a matter of survival. We have no intention of involving ourselves in your conflict. Chancellor, Picard said firmly, our Federation adheres to a strict principle of non-interference in the internal affairs of other civilizations. We are explorers, not combatants. A noble principle, Palpatine said, folding his hands. Though I wonder how long such neutrality survives contact with a war this consuming. His gaze shifted, almost idly, to Data. And you, sir, I don't believe I caught your designation. Lieutenant Commander Data, Chancellor, second officer of the Enterprise. An android, Palpatine said, something flickering behind his eyes too brief for even Troy to fully parse. How remarkable. Master Yoda mentioned your unusual resonance in the Force. I confess a personal fascination with the Force in all its expressions. Tell me, Commander, what have you observed in your short time here? It was, on its surface, an innocuous question, the kind of polite curiosity any host might extend to a scientifically minded guest. But Data's positronic processes, already cycling through the accumulated sensor data of the past several hours, registered something the humans in the room could not. A subtle asymmetry in the Chancellor's biometric signature, faint but present beneath his calm exterior, and beneath it, a texture in the ambient force field that matched, precisely, the cold, coiled presence Data had detected rising through the tower minutes before. I have observed a great deal, Chancellor, Data said carefully, his tone giving away nothing. The Force appears to be a genuine energetic phenomenon, measurable if not yet fully comprehensible to my instruments. I have also begun cross-referencing publicly available Republic military records with separatist campaign outcomes, as part of a broader effort to understand the political context of your war. Something in the room's temperature seemed to shift, imperceptible to human senses, but Troy's breath caught almost inaudibly, and Data logged the reaction alongside a corresponding, near-instantaneous recalibration in Palpatine's expression, so smooth it would have been invisible to anyone not actively searching for it. A curious pastime, Palpatine said, smiling. I hope you find the data illuminating, Commander. This war has cost the Republic dearly, and I confide in few things more fervently than my hope for its swift end. He rose, signaling the meeting's natural close. Captain, I will have quarters prepared for your crew aboard Coruscant, and I've asked the Jedi Council to extend you every courtesy while your ship remains under Republic escort. In the meantime, I trust you'll forgive an old politician's caution. I would ask that any unusual technological insight your crew develops be shared first with my office. For the Republic's benefit, of course. Of course, Chancellor, Picard said, rising and inclining his head, though something in his gut, old instinct honed across a lifetime of first contacts gone wrong, told him the request carried more weight than its casual delivery suggested. As the away team departed the tower, descending once more through Coruscant's endless canyons of light, Data fell silent. His attention turned inward, processing. Something's troubling you, Troy said quietly, falling into step beside him. The Chancellor's biometric responses were inconsistent with his stated emotional effect on 3 separate occasions. During our conversation, Data said. Additionally, the ambient force signature I detected upon our approach to his office correlates within acceptable statistical parameters with a presence I registered directly from Chancellor Palpatine himself during our meeting. I am telling you, Captain, Data said, choosing his words with the particular care he reserved for conclusions not yet fully substantiated, that I do not yet have sufficient data to draw a conclusion. But the data I do have is troubling, and I would like your permission to gather more. Above them, in his tower office, Palpatine stood alone at the window, watching the shuttle carrying his guests shrink into the traffic lanes below, and allowed himself, for just a moment, the faintest narrowing of his eyes. Data requested and received, quarters aboard. Coruscant that doubled as a makeshift analytical suite. A small apartment in the diplomatic district outfitted with whatever. Computing terminals. The Republic was willing to lend a curious android from beyond the stars. He worked through the ship's night cycle without rest. A luxury his positronic architecture had never required. Cross-referencing 3 years of publicly available Republic Senate records, military campaign summaries, and news archives against the flow of the war itself. The pattern, once he isolated it, was elegant in its cruelty. 11 times in the past standard year, Republic fleets had suffered defeats that, on their surface, appeared to be the ordinary friction of war. Supply lines cut, reinforcements delayed, intelligence that arrived a critical few hours too late. But when data mapped the timing of each failure against the Chancellor's private security briefings, obtained through channels of access the Republic had granted him with more trust than perhaps they realized, a correlation emerged with a statistical confidence he could not dismiss as coincidence. 94.7% of catastrophic Republic losses had occurred within 72 hours of a closed-door briefing between Palpatine and his senior military liaisons, briefings whose contents, curiously, were never fully reflected in the official record. It could have been innocent. Wars were chaotic. Briefings preceded battles as a matter of course. But data had also cross-referenced something else. The Separatist Council's own communications, intercepted and logged in Republic intelligence archives, which showed an uncanny pattern of Confederacy fleet movements that anticipated Republic countermeasures before those countermeasures had been formally approved by the Senate. Someone was feeding information in both directions. Someone with access to the highest levels of Republic military planning and data now suspected, based on the Force signature he'd cataloged in the Chancellor's Tower. Someone whose presence in the Force did not match any pattern the Jedi Order had on record for a being of the light. He sat with the conclusion for 4.3 seconds, an eternity, by his processing standards, turning the ethical weight of it over with the same care a human might give a decision that could not be unmade. The logical action was clear: report the pattern to Captain Picard, and through him, to the Jedi Council, who possessed both the authority and the investigative reach to pursue it properly. And yet Data hesitated, running the variables again. If his hypothesis was correct, if the Supreme Chancellor of the Galactic Republic was secretly directing the war from both sides, for purposes Data could not yet fathom, then the accusation itself, voiced prematurely or to the wrong ears, could be catastrophic, not merely for Data, or for the Enterprise crew now essentially guests within Republic space, but for the war's outcome, for the Jedi Order, for every soul in this galaxy whose fate hung on political currents. Data was only beginning to understand. He thought of Sherlock Holmes, a figure he had once portrayed in a holodeck simulation designed to sharpen his deductive faculties, the fictional detective's oft-repeated axiom that when the impossible had been eliminated, whatever remained, however improbable, must be the truth. But Data was not eliminating the impossible. He was staring at a conclusion that remained, by any conventional measure, improbable. And yet the Data insisted upon it with a consistency he could not dismiss. A chime interrupted his processing. Captain Picard's voice, transmitted from his own quarters 2 floors below. Data, report. You've been running analysis routines for 11 hours straight. Even you have limits worth respecting. Captain, Data said, and found himself, for the first time and longer than he could easily recall, genuinely uncertain how to proceed. I require your counsel on a matter of considerable delicacy. Picard arrived within minutes, Troy at his side, both still in their evening attire, drawn by something in Data's tone that neither could quite name, but both recognized as significant. Show me, Picard said. Data laid out the pattern methodically, the timing correlations, the intelligence leaks flowing in both directions, the Force signature anomaly he had detected in Palpatine's presence, inconsistent with anything cataloged in Jedi historical texts he'd been granted limited access to review. Picard listened in silence, his expression darkening with each new data point. while Troy's professional composure slipped by degrees into something closer to alarm. "You're suggesting," Picard said finally, "that the head of state of an entire galaxy is secretly orchestrating a war that has already cost, what, trillions of lives, directly and indirectly? I am suggesting the data supports that hypothesis with a confidence level I am ethically obligated to report," Data said. "I am not suggesting certainty, Captain. I am suggesting probability sufficient to warrant investigation by those with the authority to pursue it. And if you're wrong," Troy said quietly, "you've just accused the most powerful political figure in this galaxy of treason and genocide based on correlation. Data, even if every instinct in you says this is right. You understand what an accusation like this could do to the Republic, to us. We came here as guests. If this goes badly, we could be looking at war ourselves, or worse." "I am aware, Counselor," Data said, and something in his voice, a subtlety of tone he had cultivated across years of emotional study, carried a weight that surprised even Picard. "I am also aware that if I am correct, and I say nothing, I will have chosen my own safety, and the safety of this crew, over the lives of countless beings in a galaxy that welcomed us as strangers. That is not a calculation I am willing to make quietly." Picard was silent for a long moment, staring out at the endless lights of Coruscant's night skyline. A war being fought somewhere, beyond that horizon by soldiers who did not yet know whose hand truly guided it. "Then we proceed carefully," he said at last. "Very carefully, Data, before we take this to the Jedi, or to anyone. I want a plan. Because if you're right about this man, Data, he is not going to simply let us walk out of this conversation once he realizes what we know." Data nodded once, already recalculating, already aware, though he did not yet say it aloud, that somewhere above them, in a tower office bathed in amber light, the object of his investigation had very likely already begun to sense the shape of the danger closing in around his secret. The debate that followed consumed the better part of 2 hours, conducted in the hushed, urgent tones of people who understood that the wrong word spoken too loudly might carry consequences neither could take back. Picard paced the length of the small apartment while Troy sat with her hands folded, watching both men, Captain and android, circle a question that Starfleet's finest ethicists had wrestled with for 2 centuries without ever fully resolving it. "The Prime Directive exists for a reason, Data," Picard said, not for the first time. "We do not have the right to reshape the political fate of a civilization we've known for less than 72 hours. We don't understand their history, their culture, the full context of this war. What looks to you like a conspiracy might be something else. Entirely political maneuvering we simply lack the framework to interpret correctly." "With respect, Captain, I disagree," Data said, and there was something in his tone, not defiance exactly, but a rare, quiet firmness that made Troy look up. "The Prime Directive was conceived to prevent the imposition of Federation values onto civilizations developing along their own natural path. It was never intended as a shield, behind which we might justify silence in the face of genocide. If my analysis is correct, Chancellor Palpatine is not merely manipulating a war. He is engineering the deaths of Jedi, clone soldiers, and civilians across 1,000 systems, for purposes we do not yet understand. That is not a cultural practice we lack context to judge, Captain. That is mass murder, orchestrated in secret." "You don't know that," Picard said, though his voice had lost some of its earlier certainty. "No," Data agreed. "I do not know it with the certainty a court of law would require. I know it with the certainty a rational mind assigns to strong correlative evidence. And I would ask you, Captain, if you were in my position, aware of what I am aware of, could you truly walk away and say nothing, on the chance that inaction was the more prudent choice?" Picard stopped pacing. In 30 years of command, he had faced this exact configuration of variables more times than he cared to count, the terrible arithmetic of principle against consequence, the moment when doing nothing became itself a choice with a body count. He thought of Boothby's garden at the Academy, of 1,000 ethics seminars, of the quiet, hard-won wisdom that the Prime Directive was not a suicide pact, nor a shield for cowardice dressed as neutrality. Counselor, he said finally, turning to Troy. Your assessment. Troy was quiet for a moment, her empathic senses reaching, as much as they could, across a species and a force she barely understood, toward the shape of the situation itself. I don't have the tools to confirm or deny what data suggests, Captain, but I can tell you this. When I stood in that tower with Chancellor Palpatine, I felt something I've rarely felt from anyone in 20 years of service. Not menace, exactly. Something colder. An absence, almost, like standing near someone who has trained themselves for decades, not to be felt at all. I don't know what that means, but I don't think it means nothing. Picard exhaled slowly, the decision settling over him with the particular weight of command. All right, Data, I want you to understand. The moment we act on this, we cannot unact. If you're right, we may have just saved this galaxy from a horror it doesn't yet see coming. If you're wrong, we may have destabilized an entire civilization's government, based on statistical inference, and potentially triggered a war of our own making, against people who welcomed us as guests. I need you to be as certain as you can possibly be before we take one more step. I understand the stakes, Captain, Data said, and I share your caution regarding certainty, which is why I would propose we do not go to the Jedi Council. Not yet. Master Yoda has already demonstrated an unusual sensitivity toward my presence in the Force. If Chancellor Palpatine possesses similar or greater sensitivity, any communication I initiate through conventional or even subtly encoded channels risks detection. I propose instead that I continue gathering corroborating evidence, quietly and independently, while identifying which individual within the Jedi Order might be trusted with a preliminary, off-record inquiry, someone whose judgment is sound, whose position offers investigative latitude, and whose relationship to the Chancellor is not so close as to create conflict. You have someone in mind, Picard said. It wasn't a question. Master Kenobi, Data said. His reputation, based on Republic records and my direct observation, suggests a mind both disciplined and genuinely curious, qualities I believe will prove essential. He also serves as general to the Republic's forces in this war, which grants him access to military intelligence. I currently lack the clearance to review directly. Picard considered this for a long moment, then nodded once. The gesture of a man committing to a course he could not fully see the end of. Approach him carefully. Data. Test his reaction before you reveal anything substantive. And Data. He paused, something almost paternal entering his voice. An echo of every young officer he'd ever sent into danger. If at any point you believe your safety, or this crew's safety, is genuinely compromised, you abort. Is that understood? Understood, Captain, Data said, though even as he spoke the words, some quiet corner of his positronic processes, the part of him that had spent years cultivating an understanding of risk, sacrifice, and the peculiar human willingness to choose duty over safety, recognized that he had already made his decision days ago. In the instant the pattern first resolved itself in his analysis, he would see this through, whatever the data ultimately revealed, because the alternative, silence, purchased with the comfortable certainty of neutrality, was not a choice he could reconcile with whatever it was. In his 4 years of service and growth, he had come to understand as his own conscience, far above them, in a private chamber sealed against every conventional method of surveillance. Sheev Palpatine sat in meditation, his eyes closed, a thin smile playing across his lips as he traced the disturbance rippling toward him, through the Force, small, still distant, but unmistakably drawing nearer, like a single loose thread finally beginning to pull at the edge of a tapestry he had spent 40 years weaving in secret. Obi-Wan Kenobi found Data waiting for him in a quiet alcove of the Jedi Temple's archive wing. 3 days after the meeting in Palpatine's tower, a location Data had chosen deliberately, having calculated it as one of the few spaces on Coruscant with minimal surveillance infrastructure and maximum ambient Force interference, a natural shroud against anyone attempting to eavesdrop by less conventional means. Commander Data, Kenobi said, settling onto the bench, beside him with the easy grace of a man who had spent a lifetime among towering shelves of ancient knowledge. Master Yoda mentioned you'd requested access to our historical archives. I confess, I'm curious what an android finds worth studying in several thousand years of Jedi history. Patterns, Master Kenobi, Data said. I have found, across my years of service, that history often illuminates present circumstances more clearly than contemporary data alone. I wonder if I might ask you a hypothetical question. By all means, if a being possessed a strong connection to the Force, sufficient to influence perception, decision-making, or even the outcomes of large-scale conflict, and that being had never trained within the Jedi Order, nor been cataloged by your council, would the Order possess any reliable means of detecting them? If that individual had deliberately concealed their nature for decades. Kenobi's easy posture shifted by a fraction, subtle enough that only Data's heightened perceptual calibration caught it. That's a very specific hypothetical, Commander. I find precision useful, Master Kenobi. The honest answer, Kenobi said slowly, is that it would be difficult. The Sith, an ancient enemy of our order, believed extinct for 1,000 years, mastered exactly such concealment. As a matter of doctrine, the rule of two, always two, a master and an apprentice, hidden, waiting. If such a being existed today, and had trained themselves specifically to evade Jedi perception, he trailed off, studying Data with new intensity. Why are you asking me this, Commander? Data weighed the moment, running through the calculated risk one final time, and made his decision. Because I believe I may have identified statistical evidence suggesting the presence of exactly such an individual, occupying a position of significant political authority within the Republic. I would ask that you treat what I am about to share with extreme discretion, Master Kenobi, as I have not yet substantiated this hypothesis to a standard I consider conclusive, and premature disclosure could carry consequences I am not yet equipped to predict. Over the next 20 minutes, in a hushed and measured voice, Data laid out everything. The timing correlations between Republic military briefings and catastrophic defeats, the bidirectional intelligence leak between Republic and Separatist command structures, and the anomalous Force signature he had detected emanating from Chancellor Palpatine, a texture Yoda himself had seemed briefly, involuntarily troubled by during their first meeting. Kenobi listened without interruption, his expression cycling through skepticism, discomfort, and finally something that looked, to Data's practiced observation, like genuine fear held carefully in check by decades of Jedi discipline. You understand what you're suggesting, Kenobi said quietly. When Data had finished, you're suggesting the Supreme Chancellor of the Republic is a Sith Lord. I am suggesting the Data is consistent with that hypothesis, Master Kenobi. I am not asserting it as established fact. If you're right, Kenobi said, almost to himself, staring at the ancient shelves around them as though they might offer some counterargument. He has been sitting across the table from the Jedi Council for years. He appointed half our military strategy. He has access to everything: troop movements, council deliberations, the location of every Jedi general in this war. He looked back at Data, and for the first time, something raw broke through his composure. If you're right, Commander, then everyone I have ever trusted with this war's conduct has been compromised from the very center of power itself. I understand the gravity of the implication, Master Kenobi. It is why I have not yet brought this to the full council, nor to Captain Picard's superiors, nor made any record of this conversation beyond what exists in my own memory core, which I have not transmitted or backed up to any external system. I did not wish to risk premature exposure before determining whether an ally within the Order existed who could pursue this quietly. Kenobi was silent for a long moment, and Data watched him carefully, watched the way a man built his entire professional identity on discipline, and faith wrestled with the possibility that both had been exploited from within. Finally, Kenobi spoke. I'll need more than correlation, Commander. I'll need something the Council can act on without simply accusing me of paranoia. Or worse, playing into whatever game you may. Forgive me. I don't believe this. But I have to consider it, whatever game your presence in our galaxy might represent. A reasonable precaution, Data said. I would suggest we begin by cross-referencing Republic military intelligence logs, records. I do not currently have clearance to access, but which you, as a general, do. If the pattern holds under closer scrutiny, We will have moved from correlation towards something considerably closer to proof. And if it doesn't hold, then I will have been wrong. Master Kenobi, and no lasting harm will have been done beyond the two of us losing several days to a false lead. Data paused, then added, with the particular careful honesty that had become, over his years of service, something like a personal signature. I would rather be wrong and cautious than right and silent. Kenobi studied him for a long moment, then extended a hand, a very human gesture. Data noted, and one he returned without hesitation. All right, Commander. Quietly and carefully. Give me 3 days. He did not know, as he left the archive wing and made his way back toward the temple's central spire, that his conversation with Data, conducted in one of the few spaces on Coruscant genuinely shielded from surveillance, had, nonetheless, left an unmistakable ripple in the Force, a disturbance so faint that only a mind of extraordinary sensitivity would ever have noticed it at all. High above, in his private chambers, Palpatine's eyes opened slowly, his meditation interrupted by a sensation he had not felt directed at himself in over 3 decades. The unmistakable, gathering weight of suspicion, closing in from a direction he had never thought to guard. 3 days became 5. Kenobi moved through the Republic's military intelligence archives with the careful patience of a man defusing something that might detonate at the slightest misstep, cross-referencing troop deployment orders, supply chain manifests, and Chancellor's briefing logs against Data's original dataset. What he found did not merely confirm Data's hypothesis. It deepened it into something far darker than either of them had initially suspected. There's more, Kenobi said. When he finally returned to the archive alcove, his face drawn in a way Data's expression cataloging systems had not yet seen on the Jedi Master. The clone troopers, Commander. Their genetic template includes a biochip, standard, we were told, for command compliance protocols. I pulled the original procurement records. The order authorizing that chip's installation didn't come from the Senate Defense Committee. It came from the Chancellor's office directly, routed through a shell requisition that bypassed nearly every oversight process we have. A control mechanism, Data said, already extrapolating, embedded within the very soldiers fighting this war. That's my fear, Kenobi said grimly. I don't know what it does yet. I don't know if I want to know. But Commander, I took this to Master Windu this morning. Carefully, hypothetically, the way you approached me. And within hours, I received a summons from the Chancellor's office. Not a threat, nothing so obvious. Just an invitation to a private briefing tomorrow to discuss, and I quote, irregularities in recent supply chain audits that have come to his attention. Data processed this with the swiftness of a mind built for exactly such calculation, and the conclusion it produced carried an unfamiliar weight, something adjacent. He noted internally to what a human might describe as alarm. Master Kenobi, if the Chancellor is aware that supply chain irregularities are under scrutiny, and his response was immediate enough to summon you within hours of Master Windu's inquiry, this suggests either exceptional bureaucratic vigilance or a surveillance capability within his own government that we have significantly underestimated. Or, Kenobi said quietly, he has ears in the council itself. The two of them sat with that possibility for a long moment, the archive's ancient silence pressing in around them like a held breath. I would recommend, Data said finally, that you do not attend that briefing without informing at least one other trusted individual of its details in advance, and that you assume any conversation held within the Chancellor's tower is compromised from the moment you enter it. Understood, Kenobi said. Commander, I want to bring this to Master Yoda directly, not the full council. Not yet. If the Chancellor truly has eyes inside the council chamber, a formal session risks exposing everything we've gathered before we have proof strong enough to survive his inevitable denial. A prudent approach, Data agreed. I will inform Captain Picard of these developments. He should be prepared to. The comm unit at Data's wrist chirped, an alert channel reserved exclusively for emergency enterprise communications. Its priority override cutting through even the archive's dampening field. Data answered instantly. Data, report to the ship immediately. Riker's voice, tight with barely restrained urgency. We've got a problem. 2 Republic security vessels just requested emergency docking clearance to board the Enterprise, citing, and I'm quoting the transmission, a credible threat to Republic security originating from unauthorized data access by a member of your crew. Captain's stalling them, but Data, they're not asking. They're demanding, and they've got 4 gunships holding position outside our shields. Data felt something shift in his internal architecture, not fear. Precisely, an emotion he had, not yet fully integrated, even after years of experimentation, with his emotion chip, but something functionally adjacent to it. A cascading recalibration of every variable in his risk assessment matrix. Understood, Commander Riker. I am en route. He turned to Kenobi, whose own expression had hardened into something grim and resolved. It appears our investigation has been noticed sooner than anticipated. Go, Kenobi said. I'll get to Master Yoda now, before that briefing tomorrow. Commander, whatever happens in the next few hours, be careful. If Palpatine truly is what we suspect, and he believes you're the source of the threat to his secret, he will not hesitate to remove you by whatever means are available to him. Even, he added, his jaw tightening, means that look, to everyone else, like a simple security matter. Data nodded once, already calculating the fastest route back to the diplomatic shuttle bay, running through contingencies, threat assessments, and the narrowing window of options available to a crew that had arrived in this galaxy as curious explorers and now found themselves, for days later, standing unwittingly at the center of a conspiracy that reached into the highest office of an entire civilization's government. As he moved swiftly through the temple's corridors, Data allowed himself, for exactly 0.6 seconds, a rare indulgence, a full accounting of the probability that he would not survive the coming confrontation. The number was not negligible. He filed it, as he filed all data, without flinching, and quickened his pace toward whatever waited for him in the skies above Coruscant. By the time Data reached the diplomatic shuttle bay, the situation had escalated well beyond a routine security dispute. Through the transparisteel viewport, he could see the Enterprise D holding position in high orbit, her running lights steady, her shields, Data noted with a flicker of professional relief, still fully raised. A silent declaration that Captain Picard had not yet capitulated to the boarding demand. Arrayed around her in a loose but unmistakably threatening formation were the 4 Republic gunships Riker had mentioned, their weapons ports tracking the Federation vessel with the patient readiness of predators waiting for a single misstep. Commander Data, a voice behind him, Kenobi, moving fast, still in his temple robes. Master Windu a step behind him, both wearing expressions that told Data the conversation with Yoda had gone exactly as gravely as circumstances demanded. The order to board your vessel came directly from the Chancellor's office, bypassing Republic judicial and Senate security protocol entirely. That's not standard procedure, even in wartime. He's moving faster than we anticipated, Windu said grimly. If he suspects Data is the source of the inquiry into the cloned biochips, he'll want him isolated or eliminated before the investigation can go further. Master Yoda? Data asked. Meeting with the full council now, presenting what we've gathered, Kenobi said. But Commander, that will take time we may not have. We need to get you back aboard your ship, and we need your captain to hold that boarding party off without triggering an incident that gives Palpatine justification to escalate further. They commandeered a Republic cruiser waiting in the bay. Windu's authority, as a council member overriding the vessel's standard clearance protocols, and within minutes were rising through Coruscant's traffic lanes toward the tense standoff unfolding in orbit. Data used the transit time to open a priority channel to the Enterprise. Captain, this is Data. I am inbound with Masters Windu and Kenobi. Do not permit Republic security personnel to board under any circumstances. I believe the order originates directly from Chancellor Palpatine, and I believe its true purpose is my apprehension, not a legitimate security concern. Copy that, Data, Picard's voice returned, taut with the particular calm he reserved for moments of maximum danger. I've been stalling them for 11 minutes on procedural grounds, but their commander is getting impatient, and I don't have much more room to maneuver without this becoming a shooting situation. How far out are you? 90 seconds, Captain. Make it 60. The Republic cruiser burned hard for the Enterprise's position, and as they closed the final distance, Data watched the tactical display with growing unease. The four gunships had tightened their formation, weapons now fully charged, while a fifth vessel, smaller, sleeker, bearing markings Data's database flagged as belonging to the Chancellor's personal security detail rather than standard Republic military, had just dropped out of hyperspace directly behind the Enterprise's position, its trajectory calculated with an efficiency that suggested its arrival was no coincidence. "Captain," Data said urgently, "I am detecting a vessel matching Chancellor's Guard configuration on an intercept course toward the Enterprise's aft shield quadrant. I do not believe its presence is coincidental." "I see it," Picard said. "Worf, redistribute shield power, aft priority." "Riker, hail that boarding party commander one more time. Official protest. On record, that this action violates the terms of our diplomatic reception." The Republic cruiser carrying Data slid into the Enterprise's shuttle bay with barely a breath to spare, and Data was moving before the ship had fully settled, sprinting for the bridge with Kenobi and Windu close behind, the Jedi Master's presence granting them passage through Republic space that a lone Federation vessel likely could not have secured on its own. He arrived on the bridge to find Picard on his feet, jaw set, staring down the view screen at the tightening cordon of Republic vessels. "Data, report everything now." "Captain, Masters Kenobi and Windu have confirmed independently that clone trooper biochips were authorized directly through the Chancellor's office, bypassing Senate oversight. Combined with the intelligence pattern I previously identified, I believe we now possess sufficient corroborating evidence to conclude, with high confidence, that Chancellor Palpatine is a Sith Lord actively directing this war from within, and that the vessel currently approaching our aft shields under his personal authority is here to eliminate the source of that discovery, specifically myself." The bridge fell silent, save for the low hum of the ship's systems and the tactical alert chiming steadily at Worf Station. "Master Windu," Picard said, turning to the Jedi Master, "I trust you can confirm this is not a matter Starfleet or the Enterprise alone can, or should, resolve unilaterally." "You're right, Captain," Windu said grimly. "This is a matter for the Jedi Order. But right now, that vessel closing on your ship isn't going to wait for Council deliberation. And if Data is correct about what it represents, opening fire on a Federation starship in Coruscant's own orbit, in full view of half the Senate, would be an act of war the Chancellor cannot afford to be seen committing, which means he'll try something quieter." As if summoned by the words themselves, Worf's console erupted in alarm. "Captain, the Chancellor's vessel has launched a boarding pod, trajectory locked on our secondary shuttle bay, and I am detecting a life sign profile aboard consistent with significant force sensitivity, far beyond anything we have measured from Master Windu or Master Kenobi." Kenobi's face went pale. "That's not a boarding party," he said quietly. "That's an assassin." Picard's voice, when it came, carried the absolute clarity of a captain who had run out of room for anything but decisive action. "Red alert. Raise shields to maximum on the secondary bay, and prepare a security detail. Data, Worf, you're with me. Master Kenobi, Master Windu. I believe this is the moment your galaxy and mine discover exactly what kind of allies we intend to be." The Enterprise DS claxons rang out across her decks as, 90 kilometers below, in a tower bathed now in the deep violet of Coruscant's evening sky, Sheev Palpatine rose from his desk, discarded the last pretense of patience, and allowed the full, cold weight of 40 years' hidden purpose to settle across his features like a mask finally removed. The boarding pod struck the Enterprise's secondary shuttle bay with a controlled violence that spoke of purpose, rather than desperation. Its outer hatch, dissolving in a hiss of superheated plasma cutters before the security detail Picard had assembled could even take position. What emerged from the smoke was not the soldier Worf's tactical readouts had prepared them for, but something moving with a fluid, unnatural precision, a cloaked figure whose presence, even to Data's still developing sensitivity to the Force, radiated with a violence of intent that made the air itself seem to recoil. Federation security protocols, stand down and disarm. The figure said, voice modulated and flat, drawing a blade of crackling crimson, energy that hissed against the recycled air of the shuttle bay. The android and the Jedi. Nothing more is required. Worf answered with phaser fire, and Data watched, with the particular clarity of a mind processing at speeds no human observer could match. As the crimson blade moved through the bolts, trajectory with impossible economy, deflecting each one with barely a fraction of wasted motion. Kenobi was already moving, his own lightsaber blazing to life, meeting the assassin's blade in a shower of sparks that lit the bay in flashes of blue and red. Data, get to the bridge, Picard ordered, drawing his own phaser as Windu joined the clash. The Jedi Master's fighting style a controlled, devastating counterpoint to the assassin's savage efficiency. That's not a request. Captain, I can assist. You're what he came for, Picard said. Which means you're the one variable in this fight I'm not willing to risk. Go. Data hesitated exactly 0.4 seconds, long enough to calculate, with cold clarity, that his captain's tactical assessment was correct, however little he liked it, and withdrew toward the turbolift as the battle raged behind him. He did not see the moment Kenobi's blade found an opening, nor the assassin's retreat through a ruptured hull, section back toward the boarding pod. Its mission compromised the instant the target it sought had slipped from reach. He arrived on the bridge to find Picard already hailing the Jedi Council directly, Windu's authority lending the transmission, a weight that cut through every layer of Republic bureaucracy that might otherwise have smothered it. What followed, in the days after, unfolded not as a single decisive battle, but as a slow, seismic shift in the foundations of a galaxy that had, until that week, no reason to suspect the war. Consuming it was a lie built by the very man sworn to end it. Master Yoda brought Data's evidence, corroborated now by Kenobi's own investigation and the failed assassination attempt to board the Enterprise before the full Jedi Council, and though Palpatine moved with all the political cunning of a man who had spent decades preparing for exactly this contingency, denying the assassin's connection to his office, framing the boarding order as a legitimate security response gone tragically wrong. The seed of doubt Data had planted could not be fully unplanted. The Council, for the first time in 1,000 years, began watching their own Chancellor. Order 66 did not come as planned. Whether it came at all, in the altered current of this history, was a question that would take months, perhaps years, to fully answer, and Picard, watching Coruscant's skyline recede as the anomaly that had brought them here flickered back to life above the Enterprise, understood that his crew was leaving this galaxy fundamentally changed by their presence, in ways no prime directive could have anticipated or prevented. Data stood at the viewport beside him, watching the Golden City shrink into the void, carrying with him a truth he suspected he would spend a long time processing. That logic alone had never been the point. Somewhere in that galaxy of force and lightsabers and war, an android built on circuits and code had chosen, of his own volition, to risk everything for beings he had known less than 2 weeks, and in doing so, had discovered something the Jedi themselves might have called, with quiet reverence, the truest expression of the Force at all. The Enterprise D vanished back into the tear between stars, leaving behind a galaxy forever altered. Its wars true architect exposed before he could complete his design, its Jedi Order wounded but warned, its future no longer written in a script only one man had ever read. Whether that change would prove salvation or simply a different shape of tragedy, no one, not Yoda, not Kenobi, not even Data himself, could yet say. But for the first time in decades, the shadow that had waited patiently in the Senate's highest tower had been forced, however briefly, into the light, and in the vast, indifferent dark between galaxies. An android who had chosen conscience over caution carried that truth home, unwilling to ever again mistake silence for peace. May the Force be with you.